Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about lists in Adalo. Lists are what you use when you need to bring data from your database in a list form upfront to your app, whether for users to interact with or just for viewing purposes. We're going to jump into the different ways you can set up a list. Adalo does have pre-built list components or gives you the option to literally turn anything into a list. So we're going to go over both of those, and then as a bonus, we'll jump into nesting lists and getting into a bit of listception. First of all, let's talk about the list components. These are the pre-built options that Adalo gives you from the component window. I have this app already started. There's nothing really here. It's just got a little bit of styling applied, but I'm going to jump into the add components section and scroll down a little bit to this lists folder. So if I click on this, I get a drop down of all the list components available. First of all, when you're using these list components, you should just know that down the road, you're not going to have as many customization options as you're going to have if you just build your own custom list. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, the pros here are these are very easy to use. So it's quick to just drop it in, add some styling, add the data, and you've got a quick view of a list. So there's a couple things that I like to use these list components for. One is just for prototyping. So they're really quick and easy to use, makes it great for just quickly putting together a prototype of your app. Another is for just simple lists that I need. So if I don't need to be really custom with the list, I prefer to work with the list components just because they're easier to use. You do lose a little bit of the flexibility that you get with custom lists. So you kind of have to weigh those options out. And the more you work with Adalo and the more that you use some of these list components, you start to realize what the limitations are. And I'll actually walk through and show what some of these customization options will be. So let's start by first adding this simple list to the screen so we can look at what we're working with here. Now in this app, I've already added some data to work with. So I just added some people, example people in here, and I also added some states so I could build a relationship with people. So I've got this states visited field that links to states, just so we can show some of the different ways that you can use these lists. And the use cases for lists are pretty expansive. I think you'll find while you're building Adalo apps that you're going to use lists quite a bit, but we're going to go over some of the basics. The first thing that I like to do after adding a list is actually link it to the data that we're going to work with, just so we have all the options available and we can see a preview of the data that we're going to be using. And we can go through and you've got your default options. You can filter the list if you would like. You can add multiple filters if you just want to show certain records and don't want to show others. You can add sorting. So this is all kinds of things. You have all the fields available to sort by first to last or alphabetically or by date. So we have all those options. You can also set a maximum number of items. That's great for use cases where you've got really long lists and you only want to show a certain amount at a time. Then we've got in this simple list a couple options for styling. So we can add a divider. Right now, by default, you get this inset divider, which means the line starts where the text is and goes all the way to the right edge. But you can change that to none if you don't want a line there, or you can make it full if you want it to go all the way across. And you can change the divider color too. So if you wanted to do something a little different, you definitely have that option. And then with any lists, you have a click action. The click action is what happens when a user taps on one of the records in your lists. So you can do this most commonly to link to a detail screen. For example, if your list only has someone's name and maybe their email address, but you have a lot more data that you would like to show, you just don't want it in the list. What you can do here is you can add an action that links to a detail screen that has all the information in one place that's bound to that specific record using magic text. Really powerful feature there, but you can do other things too. For example, you can also update or delete or create records. So you can do any kind of database manipulation when a user clicks on a list as well. And then we've also got some other styling options. These are relatively new to Adalo. We have the options to add a list header. This would just add a title to the top of the list. We can also change the title and the subtitle of the list, which is shown here. By default, it just linked to this person first name that we have, but you can add to it or replace it. I'm just going to add some more magic text to have it show their first name and their last name. And then we can change the subtitle too. Right now it just says subtitle, so it's the same for everybody, but we can use magic text to grab an email address to add to that. And you can also change the formatting if you would like to change the way this looks for the title and the subtitle. Another feature is you can limit the number of lines that are shown. So right now it's only showing one line, but if somebody's first and last name was long enough that it needed to go to 2 lines to show the whole thing, it would be cut off. So I could say that we aren't going to set a max and we'll just keep expanding the record until the end of the name is reached. In this case, we can just leave it as 1 line because I think that's all we'll ever need. And then for the subtitle, same thing. You can change the number of lines. And then for the left section, this is where we have this avatar bubble here. What we can do is we can switch it to an icon if we want. So we could choose an icon that displays for everyone. You've got the whole library of Adalo icons here. You can use the avatar and link it to the current person's avatar using either the database image or a URL to an image if you have that in your data. And you can also set a placeholder image to show if there's no image present. So you can upload something here that just works as a placeholder. And then you can also add a right section. So right now we've got a left section for the avatar. We can add a right section if we wanted to set a specific action for each of these records. For example, maybe we wanted the option to delete one of these people without having to go to another screen, just right from the list. What you could do is you could add a delete icon. Oops, let me make sure we add it here. Give it this glaring red color. And what you could do is set an action that deletes the current record when the trash can is clicked. So those are all options with the simple list. One more styling thing that's relatively new is Adalo will let you add a background. So we can add that here, and then it opens up this possibility to change the corner rounding of the list, which you can see shown right here. You can also change the border size if you wanted to have a border, or you could set it to no border. You can also toggle the border off here. And then there's a shadow option too. So right now you see there's a list shadow. You can turn that on or off here. So all of these are possible. If we do that, we probably want a border actually. There we go. So all of these options are possible in the simple list component. So you can see there's actually quite a bit with the recent updates that you can do to style these lists, but you can definitely go a step further when you're using custom lists. So before we jump into custom lists, let's just cover a couple other of the use cases for these pre-built list components. And I would encourage you to actually add these in and play around with them. You've got things like an image list, which you can use to list out images or use kind of a grid for images. You've also got this card list, which gives you an image up top and then some details. And I think you can add some buttons down here at the bottom. And then the really interesting things with the pre-built list components are you have these horizontal lists. So you've got an avatar list, a horizontal card list, or a horizontal chip list. And these are not possible to do with custom lists. Right now, custom lists can only be scrolled vertically. So if you have a use case where you need something that's scrolled horizontally, I think the most common use case here would be something like a social media stories that are up at the top of the app. You would need to use one of these pre-built horizontal lists in order to do that. So we can even add it in and show here. Let me just scoot the simple list down and add that horizontal avatar list to the top. And you can link this to people. Again, we can go in and make sure it's choosing the avatar, set custom line spacing for this. You can also set the text below it if you want using magic text, or you could leave the text off entirely just by toggling it off. So there are a few customization options available, but if you want the horizontal scroll list, you do have to use the pre-built component. Okay, so let's talk about custom lists now. Custom lists are what you're going to use if you need something really extra custom. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend this home screen so we have some space to design. And the way I like to approach custom lists is by actually building my layout using static components in Adalo and then turning them into a list magically. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's build something a little wild. Let's start with an image. And let's make this kind of like an avatar image. We'll just make it 50 by 50. We'll set the rounding all the way up, so it's this round image, and we'll give it a border too. Okay, so we've got some, you can already see we've got some extra customization options beyond this border. We can set a custom size, add a border to it. And then let's say I want to add some text. We want the person's name. We're going to make this just a list of people. So we'll add this. Let's change the styling too. And give it this color. Okay, so we've got some extra options here. Let's add a next set of text. And for this one, let's see, what do we want to do? Oh, we can't set the magic text yet. So that's one thing. When you're working with custom lists, until you've made it a list and linked it up, I'm just using these static components, it is not going to give you the dynamic magic text options. So we just need to type placeholder for now. And we can set the formatting, make this a little smaller. Okay, very cool. And let's do this. Let's also add a button here. And then let's see, what else do we want to do to make this extra custom? Let's say we have another image, though I'll actually need to add some images to my database. Let's say we have another image that we want to add in the list, and we wouldn't be able to with the simple list. In fact, let's just make this another 50 by 50. Okay, cool. I think this is shaping up. One more thing we could do that you can't do in a simple list is we could add a rectangle. So we'll go into this simple, add a rectangle, give it some rounding on the corners. We'll give it a border. And let's make the border blue. And then the background white, or actually we could even do this light gray here. And then let's also send this to the back. All right. Shrink this down a little bit. Perfect. So this is another thing with the custom lists, is you can add kind of your own background to each list record. So what we're doing here is this whole piece of content, all these components, this whole group, we're going to turn into a list, which means this piece and everything in it is going to be repeated over and over for as many list items as we need. So let's go ahead, and I'm just clicking off on the canvas and then dragging until I've highlighted everything I want to be in my list. And I'm going to click this Make List button. And you see automatically it shows us what that list is going to look like by adding multiple records in here. Now at this point, you can go ahead and connect your list to a database. So we'll do that. And you can also choose the columns and spacing options. So if you wanted this to be multiple columns, you can. Now this is better when you don't have so much content. For example, if you just wanted to create a grid of images, you could do that and set the column count and make sure that your content is not the full width of the screen. You just want it to be a third of the screen in this scenario. But what we're going to do is, let's go back to our list, make this one column, and you can expand the spacing. What we're going to do is set this to something like 16. Okay, very cool. And the great thing now is I've got my list and I can double click in to edit the individual components. And now I can connect those to the person data that I've linked to the list. So let's do that. Let's add the person's first name and the person's last name. And then let's add their email. And you can even do, so you could do dynamic text for the button too. Like you could say, maybe we want to do contact that person. And when you're working with these custom lists, any changes you make to this first record is going to be applied to all of the records. So if we needed to make the button bigger, we can, and you'll see that it updates all across the app. We can even change the icon, maybe something like an email. And then for this last image, I'm actually going to need to add some more images to get this working. So I'm going to do that now. All right, so I've added some extra images to our person or people database. What we've done is just added these shoe logos so we could give a quick example. And what I'm going to do is click on the image and link it to the shoe logo. That way we've got it in here. And we're going to set the cropping on this image to show the full image so it isn't cropped out. Okay, cool. Now we've got a custom list in here. So you can see we have some extra customization details beyond what we have when just using the list component, but we still have a lot of the same options. So we can set a click action for the list. That way, if anyone taps on the full record, we could have something happen. You can also go in and on these individual components, set their own actions. So if someone taps on the button specifically, if you can imagine, you could have multiple buttons that did different things, or you could set icons for contacting or maybe viewing social media profiles. You can do quite a bit of stuff here. Now I'm going to jump into the preview mode just so we can show what this looks like. So we've got our horizontal list that we added up here at top. You can see it goes left to right like this. We've got our simple list right here that we created. And then we've got this custom list. So those are a few of the different options that you've got when you're working with lists. Let's talk about a couple more things. So first of all, I want to talk about nested lists because I think this becomes super powerful. So let's say that we've got this list of people, and I've already got the data, so we're going to go with this use case. We've got these states that are linked to the people, and what we want to do is show a horizontal list of all the states that they have visited. We can definitely do that. What we would do in this case is we would click on the list, and we would go into the components, and we would add a component. And let's go down to lists here, and we're going to create a little bit of a listception. And let's use this horizontal chip list. So I'm going to just hover over and drop this in. And then let's say I want to remove this shoe logo now, just so we can make some room for this new list item. And let's have it stop right here at the edge. Okay, so we've got this horizontal list. Let's do some styling. Let's set this, first of all, let's set it to our data. So let's set it to states, and now we can filter it. The really cool part here is we can filter it by the current record that this list is in. So we're going to filter it by the current person's states visited. So this will be a different filter for each record in our main list. Okay, let's remove the image because we don't actually have anything here for the state images. And you can look in chip styles and mess with some of this. Let's first of all, I think the background color is good. Let's take off the shadow though and make the border a little bit thicker. And then for the text, we've got state name. I think that's great. We'll keep that as is, but let's change the formatting. I might want to change the font, and then we can change the color too if we want to. All right, very cool. Now, when we're working with nested lists, you can also set list actions on a nested list. So let's say we had a details page for these states, and we wanted it so that if you're scrolling through the list of people and you see a state, you can tap it and view more about that state. You can set a click action on this list as well. Just wanted to point that out. So let's see, let's jump in and let's look at this. Let's see what it looks like. Scroll down, and here we go. We've got our list within a list that is working just perfectly. So the filter is only showing the items where this user has added the states to their states visited. Now we can see while we're testing this that the formatting's off just a little bit because the border doesn't quite match up with where we ended our nested list. So we can jump in to fix that. This is one of those instances where I like to zoom in really close and get really precise with my Adalo app here. So I can double click to get to the horizontal chip list, and then I can shrink it down just a little bit. I might even want to zoom in closer for some more control here. Shrink it down just a bit so it ends right before the border. And we'll hop back into preview and see how that looks. Great. I think that looks good. So now we've got our main list and we've got our nested list. Oh, and actually, you know what? In this scenario, we'd probably want to stretch it all the way to the left too, because that looks a little weird. So we can do that. We can hop over here and stretch it all the way over to the left. And we'll scroll back down and just check the preview here. Awesome. I think that's working perfectly. All right, I think this looks great for the custom list. So let's talk about a couple other things. Let's hop out and zoom out so we can see everything we're working with. One thing with these lists is if you're going to have multiple people contributing to the list, let's say a social media feed where everyone's posting an item and that item is a social media post that's going to go on a feed home screen. You can set the lists where they automatically update when somebody else contributes to it. So by default, if I were to go into this list and let's say added a field down at the bottom to add a new list item, let's say like adding a person to this list, if I added it myself, I'd see that person show up in the list immediately. However, if I've got more users and somebody else added a person, I wouldn't see them in the list until I navigated away from the screen and then back into the screen. So if I'm using just this home screen as an example, that may not be the best user experience. Okay, so what can we do in this scenario? Well, Adalo has this feature where if you click on a list, it can be the custom list or the list that you've added, whichever one you need. You can click on advanced options and choose to auto refresh the list when a user adds new items. So this can be really helpful for those scenarios where people are always contributing to a list from different user accounts. Now, there's a note on here that too many lists with this option enabled can slow down your app. So definitely be selective with it and think about whether or not you really need it on or off, because the more that have it on, the more performance your app is going to take up. The other thing that we can do is only load and display visible list items. So this is great for really long lists or maybe lists with a lot of images, because it's not going to take a long time for your screen to load if you've got so many things with this on. This means that as you're scrolling, the list items are going to be loading in. So another performance helper here is turning this on if you're going to have a long list. If it's pretty short, I would recommend just leaving it off. That way, as someone's scrolling, they don't have to wait for things to load, but definitely a good one to use if the list is long. There's one more thing I want to show you in Adalo that you can do, and that's adding a search feature for your list, especially if you've got a long list like we do of people. If you want the option for somebody to search and just have the results show up, you can definitely do that. So let's do this. Let's delete our horizontal list and simple list and just use this custom list for the demo here. And let's add a form input. So we're going to go to forms and fields, select text input, and drop it in. And what we can do here, let's style it really quick. Let's make it a little shorter. I'm going to add this icon just like this. Oh, actually, let's put it inside of the search field. And then let's make the color a little lighter. And we'll find a search. Okay, perfect. And then what I want to do here is set the default value to search. Oh, no, we don't. We don't want to do that. Just kidding. What we want to do is set the placeholder to search. The default value would actually put a value in the search field when it's first loaded. So for example, if I wanted to do John, when anyone loads the app, John would be here and only John would show up as a search result unless they replaced it with something else. So don't want to do that. I want to leave the default value blank and give it the placeholder of search. So to make this work, all we have to do now is click on the list, click add another filter, and we want to do this by, let's say we're going to search by first name, and we're going to do first name contains the form input. So what this means is it's only going to show results where the first name of the record has any of what we've entered into the input. I'll show you what that looks like. So let's hop into preview, boot this up. And you see right now we've got all of our records. That's because this is blank. So it's like a wild card. Anything is going to be showing up here. But once we start typing, let's put a K in, for example, now we're only seeing the people with a K in their first name. We can get even more specific and say KA, and we're only going to see Katie here because this is the only record that has KA in the first name. Now, if you need to search by something else, let's say email, for example, you can do that. All you have to do is change the filter where instead of using first name, you would use email. Or if you wanted to add a first and last name put together into your app, you could add that as a field. That way you could filter by it with this search bar. So there's a lot of possibilities you can do with this, but that's how you add a search function to your lists. All right, so I think we've covered the basics of lists in Adalo, both how they work, how to use the list components, and how to build custom lists as well as nested lists. Hopefully this was helpful. If you run into any issues or have questions, I'm here to help. Just let me know. See you later.